Welcome back to the Football Terrace. I'm joined by Dean Jones. A day later than normal. Couldn't do yesterday for a number of reasons. Fresh after a Man United win. So that's the first time I've been happy on one of these early week shows in a while. We've got lots of transfers to delve into. Gordon, we're talking about Fofana. We're looking at Tielemans, Leao, Neto, Pino, Dest, Gakpo, Antony. Lots to talk about tonight. But Dean, welcome this morning. Sorry, Dean, welcome back to the show. How you doing, my friend?
Mate, the reason I didn't do the show yesterday was because I wanted you to feel happier today. I knew that United were going to win that last night, and I just wanted to see what it was like to see a happy Terry. Like, how does it feel, mate? You've got that win, not just a win, the win that everyone wants every season.
Mate, it's been 4 years since my youngest son and daughter were not born the last time we beat Liverpool in the league, and my daughter was about to celebrate her 4th birthday. It was nice, and I think even more importantly than beating Liverpool, even more importantly than getting our first points of the season, it's proven for me the age-old adage is true that hard work beats talent. And when these players ran and when they outrun their opponents, lo and behold, they won a football match. And, you know, we get outrun, outworked by everybody we play normally. In all those defeats in the back end of last season, we just weren't working hard enough. And of course, we need to add quality to this team. If we add quality and it doesn't work, they don't work hard, they don't run, they don't have desire. And you heard Ten Hag last night, and I'm so glad every week now that eye test merchants one by one, the football hipsters one by one get killed off. And Ten Hag's renowned for being a technical coach, beautiful on the eye. And he basically said nothing we do works without spirit, which is essentially him saying without passion and desire, nothing is possible. So it was really good to see that last night. And some exciting transfer news for Man United as well. Casemiro out of the blue, but in. Big signing at 60 million. And now there's the talks of the Antony deal. There's a lot of talks today that this deal could be always seen as being almost imminent by some people. Most things are agreed with the player. What is the latest as far as you're aware on Antony and potentially Gakpo being on their way to Manchester United?
Oh, mate, I think it's so interesting. And, you know, that Casemiro signing is almost going to create a domino effect here. And we said this all along. The reason they wanted Frankie like 2 months ago was because they wanted to show all the other signings that they were going for, that they meant business and that they could get big deals done. And finally, it's obviously taken way longer than expected. But Casemiro is such a good signing. This is a real statement from United. So, yeah, look, in terms of Antony, the pursuit is still on. That not only still on, like it's closer than ever. There's no doubt about that. Ten Hag has reminded the United board that they bought into his vision. And as part of that, they have to trust his process and his eye test, if you like. Now, the club's recruitment policy and the people involved in that are still considered to be really important. But because of the urgent situation they've been in the past couple of weeks, extra trust is falling onto the shoulders of Ten Hag. And he's perfectly happy to take it. He is recommending players that he absolutely knows will, one, give him that work ethic that you're talking about, but two, have the quality on the ball to deliver the style of football that he's looking for. You look last night at Malacia and Lisandro. Those two footballers produce the type of performances that no Man United player in those positions have been able to do for a long time. Like Lisandro, obviously there's been doubts over him in his first couple of outings. Like the guy's finding his way in English football. Like you have to give these people some leeway to find their feet, quite literally, in a situation like that. And Malacia, honestly, I think, was he £15 million? What a signing he looks like. And these are two guys that Ten Hag took out of Eredivisie, which, let's be honest, there's not a good percentage of those players that make that move into the Premier League and do well. Like it's a really tough one, tough place to pick up players. But nobody knows that plays better than Ten Hag. So not only is he going for now players that he worked with at Ajax, but he's going for players like Malacia, who always did well against him. And that's why, you know, Antony, obviously a player he knows inside out, but also Gakpo, who always did well against him. He knows that these guys can come in and do a job for him. And weeks to go over the window, less than that, they need players that are going to work. And Ten Hag is assuring them that these guys are going to work. Like, mate, they're still in for Frankie de Jong, still in for Antony or Gakpo. They've considered Pulisic. They're considering Sergio Dest. This is really exciting on the back of signing Casemiro, Malacia and Martinez. We might actually end up, looking back here, at a transfer window where Man United spend close to, £250 million? that will look funny in history, because I mean, you'll look back and be like, so they spent the whole summer protesting against these Glazers, whoever they were, and now they never spend money and they don't back the club. But they spent £250 million on players for them that season. Like that's so it would look. I'm not like, you have to be here and now to understand like the process of what's actually gone on. But the Glazers, in 30 years' time, people might look back on this and like, were they really as bad as everyone said? Because it looks like they threw loads of money at this and actually weren't too bad. But that's where we're heading now, and it might be that you look back on an unbelievable transfer window.
Look, I would say this. Not so much yourself, but other journalists we've had on have spoke very much about we may only spend up to 120, 130 this year. The Glazers, for me, until this pressure was really put on by fans, by other billionaires and consortiums talking about trying to take over, protests, Glazer out trending. And funnily enough, what helped it this time around was the mainstream media really getting onto them as well. Suddenly, all this money appeared from absolutely nowhere, like seemingly we didn't have any, and it's there being spent. And I don't think the Glazers can ever be accused of not spending the club's money on players. We've always spent a lot of money on players since Fergie's gone, £1 billion, but it's been the right players. And for me, the fact that we were looking at Arnautovic and Rabiot, I still fervently believe, I don't care what the report said, that they were not players that Ten Hag was sitting there and saying, yes, I want. That's the budget. What's the best we can get for that money? And I think the pressure applied by everybody has made the Glazers go, we've got to give this guy a bit more money. And seemingly we go out and find one of the best DMs in the world. And I think that had a knock-on effect. I think, as you said, backstage, dropping Ronaldo and Maguire has a knock-on effect. Oh my God, we're not safe. And even I think the most standout thing that was done yesterday by Erik Ten Hag was bringing on Anthony Martial instead of Ronaldo. We've seen Ragnick, we've seen Ollie sub those players before or start them on the bench, but they've always been the first two to come on. And I'm telling you, if Ollie was our manager yesterday, Ronaldo and Maguire would have both been brought on at about 50, 55 minutes. And it was nice to see things go in the other direction. But listen, if we end up with Dest, if we end up with Gakpo or Antony, some reports in the Netherlands suggest it could be both. Maybe if Ronaldo leaves, it would be both. If we end up with those two players, Dest, and listen, you mentioned there Frankie de Jong. We keep hearing reports we're still in for him. If Man United end the summer with Casemiro and de Jong as their double pivot midfield, that's a midfield that can compete with any in the world. Then you look at it and go, right, you've given Ten Hag the money. Well done. The next element is give Ten Hag 2 to 3 years, complete anonymity and power to buy who he wants, sell who he wants, and eradicate player power. If Ronaldo starts leaking stuff to the press because he's not playing, you back the manager and you get him out. And they're all the things that Man United fans really focus on beyond the money being spent. But it was a brilliant night last night. And as you say, Antony closer than ever. We're looking at Gakpo. I wanted to get your take on the Antony deal around the price. I mean, there's a lot of talk of 94 million euros. Is it going to be as high as that, do you think?
I do at this stage, yeah. I do think it's going to be end up being around that figure. And I mean, it's incredible, really, that these are the type of numbers we're talking about after all this time, because at that sort of money, you probably could have got him at the start of the window. But it's taken this long to accept that Ajax are actually going to hold out for a certain amount of money and that you're going to have to pay it. And obviously, like Ajax are looking to get a replacement. Obviously, Ziyech, it looks like he's going to be that man. But Antony is desperate for this transfer to now happen, especially he will be after watching last night. And he's seen Casemiro arriving at the stadium. He's seen United play a style of football like that. He's been keen to link up again with Ten Hag anyway. But now there'll be that extra want from him to actually get there. And I think that, it's still a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. What number did you say? How much did you say in pounds you were expecting it to be?
94 million euros. That's about 78, 79 million pounds.
Yeah, I was going to say. So it was just shy of 80. Yeah. So it's a lot of money. And I mean, you're talking here about the levels we were talking about with Sancho and Maguire and stuff. So United have been here before. They've shopped in this area. And ultimately, you just got to pay it at this point. I mean, Antony is a very, very good player. Ten Hag knows what he's getting. And you can see the dynamic and the style of player that he wants in his front line. There aren't many of them around. And certainly United don't have any beyond. So Rashford, Martial and Sancho. In pre-season, the first few games, the way those three were linking up was much more like what we saw last night in the first half. Like that intensity and purpose of United's forward movements, that is actually what you were seeing in the early stages of United's pre-season. It fell away. Jadon Sancho was ill for the last game of United's pre-season tour. So he was taken out of the equation. And then the first game of the season, obviously, Martial was ill. So that front three hadn't had the chance to actually get going again. And last night, you see that there's actually understanding between those three particularly that works. Elanga has been going through the motions in pre-season 2 with them, working the same movements, the same rhythms, and is part of that quartet, if you like. And now you throw Antony into it too, and he fits. Ronaldo doesn't fit. He'll be pushing for an exit. Like, he won't be happy about being left on the bench last night against Liverpool. He won't have that. And I think United have come around too to the idea that we're better off without him. Like, we are actually going to be better off without him.
Look, look, Ronaldo scored a lot of goals last year. I'll always respect him for what he's done for our club last season in parts. And of course, the legendary campaigns he had in his earlier career. This guy is a Man United GOAT. He's the footballing GOAT, in my opinion. But time waits for no man. And we have to look beyond him. People say, well, who's going to score your goals if he's not in your team? The two players who barely could score a goal last year from Ronaldo joining, one was Sancho, who wasn't here before, but Rashford had 2 campaigns prior to Ronaldo joining where his GA combined was over 35 to 40. There was only one other left-sided attacker in Europe's top 4 leagues over those 2 seasons that scored and assisted more, and that was Son by about 2 or 3. Like, Rashford can score our goals, Sancho can score and create our goals, Martial in the time being can score and create our goals. A team working and being cohesive is far more important than a better out-and-out goal scorer, because we just don't create enough as a team. And last night should be a blueprint, and there should be more investment. You mentioned Dest, of course, fairly menial fee in comparison to Antony. They're talking sort of like 20-25 million. What is the latest with that potential deal for Manchester United?
Yeah, I mean, they're going back and they're knocking on the door because Barcelona want to get rid of him. And Sergio Dest, there's not really anywhere else he wants to go. But obviously, Ten Hag put a lot of trust in him as a kid, helps him come through at Ajax and get his move to Barcelona. Dest fallen away, unfortunately, for him at Barcelona. It was a dream move for him. He doesn't want to give up on it, I guess, much like Frenkie de Jong. But ultimately, Barca they're trying to include him in swap deals. They're trying to push him out the door. And the most obvious place right now for him to land is Old Trafford. And Ten Hag absolutely does want him on board. Their right back slot is one that he's concerned about. And I can actually see Dest happening towards the back end of the window. If he does leave, I see him going to Old Trafford. I think it'd be a really good transfer. He's a player I really like. Through some of my other jobs, I watch him not only in club football, but international football too. And I know all about his upbringing and stuff. And he's so hardworking. He's so talented. He fits perfectly with what Ten Hag is building right now. And there are players in that team I think he'd link up with really, really nicely. So I would definitely keep an eye on Dest. Chelsea have been keeping an eye on that too. I just think it makes much more sense of him at this stage of his career to take the move from Ten Hag. If Ten Hag wants you and you know that he's got the best out of you before, then you go for it in my eyes. Man United perfectly happy for United to pursue this. Obviously, they want Wan-Bissaka to find a new club, or Dalot, if that's going to be the case. One of them's got to go, but obviously it seems like Ten Hag doesn't have much of a plan for Wan-Bissaka, so it'd be most likely he goes. But yeah, I think that Dest is one to look out for in this last week.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we can get him for around about 20-25 million, which has been stated, I think it's a decent player. He's better than what we've got. We might even be able to get with a loan with an option similar money for listen. I actually think someone like an AWB going to a smaller club that sits back a lot more and just defends, I think they'll get a lot out of him. I actually think a sort of loan with an option to buy is probably our better.
Yeah, he's a good player. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things. You loan with an option and he does well, the value will increase again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's an element of getting the right business decision made here, but I think he's a very talented player. And look, United fans shouldn't be getting carried away, but I certainly feel there should be an element of excitement here. There should be an element of, okay, well, we're starting to get what we want. I still think we've got to keep the Glazer out campaign alive. I still think we've got to keep pushing. Listen, I still want Sir Jim Ratcliffe to make a bid. I still want the Glazer to sell. But like I've always said, and I've always thrown this in my Glazer out once, is the other option is a compromise. Now I'm a Union man. There is always compromise. Start running the club well, as you did under Fergie, because you did. We won multiple Premier Leagues, we won Champions Leagues. We got the 3 Champions League finals under Fergie and the Glazers. You may not like them ever. You may not go, we've got great owners. But if you spend the money correctly and you build something, And I was saying to someone the other day that was like, I don't understand what's wrong with your club. It looks fine on the outside. I said, for 9 years, our first team have played a different brand of football to all of the academy teams. So there isn't even a clear gateway between the academy team and the first team. They don't play the same brand. You're a Fulham fan. You've actually got a brilliant academy, which my old PE teacher is part of, Mr. Hagger. And your first team and your academy team play a very similar brand of football. So when you get promoted, it isn't like you go from playing Pep football to playing Sam Allardyce football. And that's how Man United have operated. So lots of things to be positive about, but keep the pressure up, Manchester United fans. We've got some super chats here. This one here says, Terry, with the signing Erik ten Hag has made, Malacia and Martinez and Eriksen, do you have more faith in other targets, thoughts and feelings? I've always had faith in what the manager wants to do. My worry has always been the club not backing it in the longer term. And in a year's time going, listen, I know you want these players, but suddenly this superstar with huge social media following is available and we want to buy him. Those are the mistakes we've made before. We've done it so many times. Like, that's more my concern. It's 5 a.m. where I am. So big up Tel and the Terrace for keeping me distracted, dealing with insomnia. I'm also trying to see if Terry can go a full show without gloating about Leon Edwards beating the greatest welterweight of all time. Listen, I don't really have an issue with Usman. When I say I don't like him because he's so goddamn good. And I was glad to see him get beat by a fellow Englishman. Of course, Leon Edwards English and Jamaican, and yeah, very happy. So I'm not going to gloat. Usman will be back, but what a win! What a win! What a win! Dean, show some respect for the Eredivisie. Players from each league can flop. Even English Premier League players. Eredivisie soon overtakes League R rank-wise. You didn't say anything bad. You praised them.
Oh, I praise. I just said there's not a high percentage of players that come here and are successful, and I think that's probably true, to be honest. On the whole, like it's not a league that people turn to for guaranteed success. There's definitely good players coming out there, and obviously Ajax is the main one. But even some players that come through the Ajax system, say Hakim Ziyech goes to Chelsea, he's been a flop. So there are high profile players that don't work out. Eredivisie is great. Obviously you have to watch Ajax, or you're not keeping up with modern day football. Like they set the bar for the style of football you play, and they obviously are almost a breeding ground for talent that comes through. So absolutely no disrespect to Eredivisie.
Do you know what I think it is? We just spoke there about Man United not having a clear gateway from the academy to the first team. I think stylistically, people sign these Dutch players, but they're not implementing a system which is conducive with Dutch football. It's like, I find with Dutch players, all their clubs play a very similar way. It's like a national thing. Same as in Germany, there is almost I feel like the club teams in certain countries, and this is a very macro overview, but the club teams playing a style which matches what their national team does. And clubs, obviously, they want their clubs to be successful, but there is almost this notion of we create for our nation as well. Where I think in England, like, you look in our Premier League, you can get 10 different styles across 20 teams. There is no universal way of playing football here, where I find in Europe, that's a little less, they're a little more uniformed in that way. And if you sign a player from the Eredivisie and you try and make him play Tuchel style of football, of course there's a chance it isn't going to work, because they don't grow up playing like that, or that isn't what they're best suited to. So I think there's a few things at play there. But viewers, please make sure those like buttons are being smashed. If we hit 1,000 likes while we're live, we will give away 50 free memberships to you today, because I'm feeling very, very generous indeed. We've got Chelsea news to come later on during the show, so stay with us for that. But I wanted to touch on Arsenal. Pedro Neto, reportedly the secret winger they were linked with, but reportedly he's not the only target. Still, Youri Pino is being spoken about. What's the latest, Dean, when it comes to Arsenal and their pursuit of a new winger?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we did know that Arsenal had another name on their radar. We've talked about it for a couple of weeks now, and Pedro Neto is the one that they're narrowing in on here. Now, we're still waiting for an actual bid to go in, so we have to wait to see whether that lands. But they've been putting the feelers out. They know it's not going to be an easy deal to get done, and Wolves are going to hold out for every penny they can. It's going to be around about the £50 million mark. George Mendes behind this one too. Now, they are still in on the case of Youri Pino, who scored in a win at the weekend for Villarreal, and he's going. he's continuing to play for his club as normal, but I'm told he is very much open to a transfer like this and would be excited to join Arsenal. The key here is for Arteta in terms of immediately strengthening his squad and that starting 11. If anyone drops out of it, you have to have somebody that steps straight in. Now, Arteta would prefer a player that fits in seamlessly, and look, Neto ticks that box and Pino doesn't because he's playing in the Premier League already. Pino is comparably inexperienced at the top level, and I guess you could argue there'll be a risk there in a similar way that there was to Nicola Pepe when he arrived. Because of that Premier League experience and that nous that he's got at the league, I think that he has the edge right now, and that Neto is a more obvious signing for this Arsenal team, and I think he'd be a better signing. But taking that into account, they're not the only two names they're looking at. In the background, there's Wilfried Zaha, for example. That deal is not moving forward at the moment, but Zaha is definitely one of those players that ticks those boxes and that Arsenal have had an eye on. So we'll have to wait to see whether they decide to go down that path. Wilfried Zaha, obviously in red-hot form at the moment, having a good start to the season. And, obviously a key too is getting Nicola Pepe actually out the door at Arsenal. We're getting closer. They were holding out a bit longer. They wanted, the club and Pepe himself wanted to see if other clubs came in. At the moment, it is Nice being given the opportunity to sign him. They need to find an agreement, particularly over his wages and, the form of that wage that they take on and a loan deal. But if it is a loan deal, Arsenal still look to offload Pepe permanently at the end of that agreement because he just doesn't fit into what Arteta is building right now. I wondered if Arsenal might go for someone like Ismaila Sarr, who's going to be on the lookout for a move in this last week. His Villa transfer hit the bumpers, and he'll be on the lookout to maybe an Everton or a Palace. I guess if Zaha was to go, maybe they'd look down that path. Maybe even Man United, if everything was to fall through, they could go for an Ismaila Sarr. They've certainly had interest in him in the past. But yeah, I think that when you see what Arsenal have built this season, when you see how well they've got to where they are, putting in an untested Premier League player as a risk, and I think that Neto does look like a good get, even at 50 million, to be honest.
Yeah, look, I think Neto would be brilliant for them, and Arsenal fans may not want to agree with this, but like Neto will push Saka for that place, and Saka may get moved to the left if they feel if Arteta thinks that he's better there than Martinelli. But Neto is better in terms of beating a man, in terms of dribbling straight at them and getting to that byline. It's whether or not his end product is there, and I think with someone like Neto, there's always been question marks about how good the end product is, and I think they're fair questions. But I kind of feel that you will get a bit of the Jota effect if he leaves. If he's surrounded by better players, better system, bigger club, I think you're going to see a serious player there. And you don't spend £50 million on an individual that's there just to be a backup, there just for rotation. That's the kind of money you spend on someone that you expect to break into your first team, or at the very least go toe to toe. If you're dropping £15 million on a kind of a backup player, then fair enough. But 50 million is a first team level purchase. And I think Pedro Neto has the ability to stop Bukayo Saka from playing. And this is something that Arsenal fans should embrace rather than pushing back. Because if you keep Bukayo Saka out of a team, that means you've just signed someone better or who's playing better. Therefore, you're going to be better. And I kind of feel Man United and Arsenal fans are falling into this trap in the last 3 to 4 years since we've been crap. And that's of loving players more than we love the club. The only thing we've had to hold on to, the only thing we've had to cheer about has been the emergence of a youth player or a signing that's done well, whether it be Saka, whether it be Bruno at Man United, as opposed to thinking more about the team. And I think Pedro Neto would be so good for this Arsenal side. Pino, I don't know enough about. I don't watch enough of Villarreal, but very, very talented. But again, I think he's someone that's behind Neto, behind Saka in terms of his development, so it would take longer. Ismaila Sarr, again, I don't think he's of Saka's level. I think he's a good backup. But I think if they land Neto at 50 million, what a signing it will be for Arsenal. And I'm already talking about Arsenal as a team that I think could push this year even into a title challenge in terms of if they keep improving at this rate and everything else. They look so good. They look so dangerous. If they add more quality to that, who knows what they could do this year, because they look brilliant in his opening 3 games.
Yeah, and I think, Arteta wants to send out a message to this team that you're not safe. And also, he doesn't want Arsenal to just challenge on one front. He wants them to be competitive in every competition they play. And that's not a position this club's been in for a while now. And I think, you see Zinchenko's side and everyone's like, he must be playing as a midfielder. Well, no, he's not. He's playing as a left back, but he's playing as a different type of left back to what Tierney's been offering. And like, they can still play a different style if Zinchenko does come inside. But ultimately, Zinchenko's proven that Arsenal could play in a different way when he is playing, and I think that is what Arteta will want too from this forward signing. And we know that, like, since the Rafinha offer, that they've been looking down this path. I think that Bukayo Saka, like the one Arsenal player from that quartet, yet to get off the mark in terms of goals or assists, which is a big surprise. But his time will come. It's not like he's playing badly. He's a massively important part of Arteta's plan. And I guess, look, if they were to sign somebody in his position, then you're immediately going to be like, oh, well, hang on, Jurgen Klopp's been talking him up. Jurgen Klopp's going to bid for him now. Don't risk that. Like, Saka's that good that he might leave. I don't think he will. I don't think that that's what he'll be doing right now. I think that he should embrace a challenge too. Like, if you're going to be at a club that has the genuine ambition to get in that mix of competing for a title, then you have to be stronger beyond that starting 11 than Arsenal probably are right now. So let's wait and see whether they do go down this route. But Pedro Neto, definitely one to look out for.
Look, I agree with that. And I think that's where, as you say, it's if you want to win the league, if you want to do well in the cups, you're going to need all these players. And it shouldn't really matter who's in your lineup as long as your football team, like everyone knows, I'm a big fan of Rashford. I was happy he scored last night. If he doesn't improve and Gakpo and Antony come in and keep him out the team, but Man United are winning, I'm not going to care one little bit. It's like, great. I remember when Beckham was sold, I nearly cried as a kid. I couldn't believe it. He was gone. And then we signed Ronaldo, and the rest is history. It is what it is. It's just one of them things. Arsenal, of course, and we probably spoke Youri Tielemans once a week now for about 12 weeks.
This is part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's now talk today that I want to make sure I read this right. There's a growing expectation that Youri Tielemans' price is expected to be lowered again by the end of the window. Arsenal remain interested. Is that the case, or do you feel like maybe this deal was just sort of run its course now?
No, they are still interested, and it's a complicated situation behind the scenes that's going to define whether or not they actually go for him. But basically, they're looking at their midfield options and what their selection process is going to be like as this season wears on, and they're trying to figure out whether they are going to have the depth or if they're one player short, basically. And if they get towards the deadline and they're like, this is too risky, we need to bring one in, Tielemans will be the one they go for. At the moment, they just haven't made that decision yet. And obviously, like, this affects the players like Tielemans in terms of his frame of mind. He was left out at the weekend, and I'm not surprised it's affecting his state of mind, to be honest, because, like you say, we've been waiting on this transfer for about 3 months, and I'm bored of it. So God knows what it's like for him, who's actually having to go through it and live it every single day. I've got some sympathy for him here because he was given strong indication from intermediaries that a new club would be found by the start of the season. And here we are, 3 game weeks in, and he's on the bench at Leicester. Like, this is not what he had in mind. He thought he was going to be joining a team competing, if not already in the Champions League. And Leicester were open to that. They said, okay, we will allow you to go and fulfill your ambitions, but we will need a certain amount of money to come in. We will need it to happen within this time frame. And it will have to suit us as well as you so that it can happen and we can find a replacement. And, we're not in a situation where any of that has happened. Tielemans has been pretty professional about this, not kicked up a fuss. It's still play if Brendan Rodgers calls on him. I've said before in here, Brendan Rodgers does believe that Youri Tielemans is replaceable, but he respects that, like, if he feels that he can go and play at a level higher than Leicester, then fair enough. The club's not in a great situation right now, obviously. Like, it's been a poor start to the season, but I think it hasn't been helped, obviously, by the fact Schmeichel's gone. There's been the Fofana and there's been Tielemans stuff, and there was the Jamie Vardy stuff, which we talked about on here ahead of him actually getting the new contract, which he wanted, and there was uncertainty about that situation. So they've had loads of different factors to take into account, but for Tielemans on a personal level, it's been a tricky time. And that tricky time's continuing right now because until the deadline passes, his head's just not going to be straight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Arsenal do need a player like him. I think they need more more, just like with Pedro and Neto, they need someone that's going to come in when it comes to progressing that ball, who's going to compete. Interestingly, Xhaka's had a new lease of life. These runs into the box, playing Xhaka further up the field looks very good. Xhaka near his own box, not so much. There are certain players you just don't want there. Like he's you're okay giving the ball away when you're attacking. You're okay if you make 4 runs into the box and each time you control the ball, it's a bit off. You give a foul away or up that end of the pitch. You don't want to play that gives the ball away a lot or commit silly fouls around the edge of your box. You know, one, you pick up yellow cards and reds with him, and secondly, you give away opportunities. But I do feel like if they throw in a Tielemans and they throw in Neto, as you've mentioned, they can go on to next levels. In terms of Arsenal, I mean, how well do you think, like, how good do you think they are right now? Because some people think that they've really turned the corner. There are some rivals that think they haven't played anybody yet. Like, what's your take on how good Arsenal started the season, Dean?
I mean, look, they can only beat what's put in front of them. So it's not their fault that they had a good fixture list to begin this campaign with. But on the flip side, they had to live up to the expectation and actually start the season in a way that they've been going about their pre-season. And by beating Palace on that opening night 2-0, they kind of set the bar high, then went on and beat Leicester 4-2. And then they've made it 3 out of 3 by going and beating Bournemouth. So I've been really, really impressed by their style of play and the energy and the character that this team has shown. I think defensively, they've got a lot more about them. Saliba's shown a real physicality and determination and strength of mind that is going to help this team massively. Ben White, even playing at right back, I think is doing a decent job. So I really like where Arsenal are at, and I think that like they just couldn't have done more than what's asked for them. Now the next 2 games, they've obviously got Fulham at home and Aston Villa. So 2 more games that you say, right, well, you should win these games. There's a new expectation at Arsenal. They're expected to go and win every games. And the way you're looking at it, it should get to the point where it's 5 out of 5. And then their first test really is going to come when they play Man United on September the 4th. It's a time when the transfer window is closed. Man United have got their squad for the season. It might be, with top of the show, we're talking about the players United still looking at. So not only will they have Eriksen and Casemiro and Malacia and Martinez, they might have De Jong, they might have Antony, they might have Gakpo or Pulisic or Serginho Dest. They'll have a couple of those guys, right? That's the first proper test for Arsenal.
Yeah, the Man United game's an interesting one because you look at it before last night, Arsenal fans probably think easy. You see that performance and you think, oh, now what Man United do against Southampton and Leicester? Man United against Southampton and Leicester work as hard, don't concede, create lots of chances, score goals. That Man United Arsenal game becomes massive, not just because of the rivalry, but because it's the acid test again for both. And Man United really started to improve. Are Arsenal as good as we all think they are? Maybe you actually see a brilliant game. It ends 1-1. You realize both have turned that corner.
Yeah,
but there's a lot riding on that game, and it's an Arsenal for me. People think I'm like blowing smoke up their arse. I'm really not. I'm watching them, and I see a team I feel is becoming dangerous, becoming scary. The way they move the ball, the power they have, the skill they have, the speed they have, and they're still so young. This team in 2 years' time is still going to be young, but they're growing in experience, and that's why I kind of feel with Jesus and Zinchenko coming in, Tielemans is of a good age as well. It's that mid-20 range they're going for. Neto's a little younger, of course, but it's that mid-20 range, grown men. You know, the frontal vortex is fully developed in their brain. They're not babies, you know, they can handle the pressure. And I look at them and I really do feel like they're a team that could develop this year into title contenders. Of course, it all depends on how good City are. Do they win the first 15, like the next 10 games and pull away from everybody? But I feel like Arsenal were a team, and I use Leicester as an example every time. I feel people are going to look at Arsenal and go, they're going to fall off. They're going to fall off. They'll lose a game, go, this will be it. They'll fall off. I just don't think they will. I think they're going to have a very, very good season indeed, especially if they add a Tielemans or a player like him or a Pedro Neto. I think then you look at the squad and go, that's really strong. And Saliba's coming at the back, and barring the tequila song being in everybody's heads all Saturday evening, I'm sure, like, I don't know about you, I was walking around the house whistling it. I couldn't believe it. I was whistling, and I was actually cursing Arsenal. I'm like, why am I whistling this?
Don't
this
do
song?
that, mate.
I know
Don't
it's an awful one. That's the thing with the football songs we sing here in England. The tunes are also catchy, aren't they? And then you just
They
get it in
are.
your head.
They
You get
are.
it,
But
you get
look,
it in your head.
Arsenal are reaping the rewards of getting that Jesus deal done so early, and they were able to have a full pre-season with the team that they wanted to play at the start of the season. So they're weeks ahead of everybody else. And I think if you were to compare that to, I don't know, say Man United, if Man United don't have their proper squad ready until that, whatever it is at that time, probably game week 6 or something, when they do face Arsenal, it's then going to take that team another month or so to gel, right? So you've got a month to get them, keep them growing, and to put the pieces into place. Then you're at game week 10. And I mean, you've only got till game week 16, and then there's a pause, and then you go into the World Cup. So it's a very strange campaign, and we've got to keep bearing this in mind, that the momentum of this season is going to really upset some teams. Now, Arsenal just have to keep this flowing up to that point, and the teams like Man United are playing catch up already, obviously. But you need to get your transfers in and hope that they gel as well as Arsenal's have, because not only do Arsenal have a fixed style of play now that everybody's already bought into, but they can identify players in this final week that can actually just slot into roles, and then it's like, off you go.
No, couldn't agree with you more. Staying in London, we are going to talk Liverpool a little bit later, people, but staying in London, Chelsea, and there's lots of deals to talk about on here, but I think we really have to start with £60 million bid, 50 plus 10 is being reported for Anthony Gordon. I mean, this is beyond on with my little green tick. This is beyond like Chelsea trying to advance it. A lot of Chelsea fans for about a week have almost trying to play it down like it's some weird media speculation. This is real, right?
It is real, and it's more money, way more money than I initially expected. I think it was last week when we were talking on here that this transfer came about. It was about that time anyway. We were starting to talk about the details of it. And I was briefed at the time that Chelsea would be willing to get up to the figures of around 40 million, which is what we were looking at that point, 40 to 50 million. But we would be expecting about 25 million of that to be up front. Now, since then, conversations have continued, and you have to say that Everton are winning these conversations, because at the moment, the deal's looking like it's going to be 50 to 60 million and about 40 million of it up front, maybe even more than that at this point. That is a huge, huge amount of money for Chelsea to be investing in a player like Anthony Gordon. But I don't want to show this player any disrespect, because he is really good. And I've seen, especially when this transfer rumour first came out, I saw too many people on TV, pundits, presenters, kind of laughing at it. I don't think you should laugh at it, because Chelsea have kind of two ways of signing players. Basically, there's the players that are obvious that they've gone and signed, Koulibaly, Sterling. I could probably put Cucurella into that mold, but then you've also got that younger version of player that they're trying to sign, all the like 18 to 20-year-olds that seem to be coming through the door. And Gordon's kind of a mix of the two. Like, this isn't a player who's the finished article. This is a player who doesn't really even have a specific defined role himself yet, but he's a player that can shake things up at Chelsea. He can add competition to that squad. And from a personal point of view, it can improve. Now, obviously, Everton are pretty scared of this situation. Lampard is very worried already about the morale of his squad, as well as the quality of his squad. Losing Gordon is just not something he wants to happen. But when you get to this level of finance, you can't ignore it. And for Gordon, he's got to be open to this, because however much he might be risk being disliked by the Everton fan base in a moment when they need him, he's got to show ambition of his own. He wants to lift his own level. He wants to become an international and a regular international and play in Europe. And he's got the mentality of an elite young player in this game. Loyalty is kind of dead. Like, it's the loyalty like you or I would have known it growing up doesn't really exist. There's very few players that are ever going to show that to one club now. And if you're Anthony Gordon and you're part of a team that is staring a relegation battle in the face for a second year in a row, you've got to contemplate what you do next. I see players do it at Fulham all the time. And, that's last season, like say Carvalho, for example, like Fulham are on the up and up, and they lose a player like that. Okay, that was to Liverpool, and you can understand his reasons for that. But there's also that part of you like, well, stay with us, we'll help you grow. But players are like, no, because what if I go stale in this team? What if my form drops off because this team is not good enough? And that's where Anthony Gordon's mind will be at the moment, and the people around him will be advising him to remain very open-minded about this. We have to understand the decision process that goes into it. So this is a very serious pursuit of Anthony Gordon. Chelsea definitely are trying to sign him. It's not like he's going to be guaranteed a spot in their first team, but we've seen that Chelsea's attack is blunt at the moment. Like there's not enough options up there. They're still trying to offload Ziyech, Pulisic, Werner's gone, Hudson-Odoi will be gone. And if that's happening, then they need some new life in there.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea fans are really not like happy with it, as you've already alluded to. I mean, I mean, a lot of people like overrated Englishman. Don't want him. Is he? I don't even know if he's English or Scottish or Welsh. I never even checked.
He's English, yeah. He's English.
British. We'll just say British. Covers all bases. And I think he's really good. 60 million, though, it does feel a little bit excessive, in my opinion, in terms of the total cost. But I think what Chelsea fans are really doing is projecting. I think what Chelsea fans are really doing is saying, I think they're losing faith with Thomas Tuchel. I think I've been in this game, this social media game for a long time, and pretty much since it started. And you can always tell when a fan base is starting to turn against the manager. They do the whole, I love you, but I really rate you. I think you're a great manager, but we had a guy on one of our shows last night who says how much he loves and rates Tuchel, but says he doesn't rate his talent ID, doesn't like his tactics, doesn't like how he plays football, and thinks that he is the biggest, mostly culpable for how badly they attack and how none of the players that he manages have improved. I'm like,
what does he rate?
Exactly, right? And that's what you're seeing. It's like, I rate him, but, and then you list all the things they list that are wrong with him, and it's like, what is there left to say you're great at? And I think that you're starting to see Chelsea fans, if this was last summer after winning the Champions League, they would have gone, there's got to be a player in there because Thomas Tuchel is buying him. Thomas Tuchel is world class. And look, I think that they've signed some brilliant players this summer. I do agree that Antony is overpriced. However, when Gibbs White is being sold for 44 million, when Man United are going to spend 70 plus million on Antony, when 30-year-olds are going for 60 million pounds, this is the going rate. And I find it a little bit ironic from Chelsea fans, who were the first club to really start to inflate the market. Yes, it was 20 odd years ago when you were dropping 27 million pounds on Sean Wright Phillips's, when you dropped, I don't know how much, was it 25, 30 million on an average Scott Parker? Like, this has been going on a long time. So it's not the first time Chelsea have done this in their history. It isn't going to be the last time, but I think he's a good player. I think he's better than a large amount of the attackers that they've got. And I think he'll do a better job than a large amount of the attackers they've had or going to buy. I think he'll be better than Werner. I almost guarantee Chelsea fans this. I bet he scores and creates more than Kai Havertz does, who was more expensive. So for me, I get Chelsea fans' frustration, but I think a lot of them are projecting more along the lines of, I'm not too sure about Thomas Tuchel anymore. Is he really the guy to take us forward? I'm just getting that feeling from them. A few more bad results, and I think you'll start to see a mass of Chelsea fans turn on Thomas Tuchel. I really, really do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a brave place to be because he's one of the best coaches in the game. And if you turn your back on him, where are you going to go? Like Pochettino? You're going to take an old Tottenham manager? Is that where you're going to be at? Like, where do you think you can turn next? So it's a big decision if they do go down that path. I think you've also got to consider various aspects. Look, I can't completely defend Tuchel. Like, his Chelsea team have underperformed at times, and that performance at the weekend was extremely worrying. But also, he's been working in really difficult circumstances. I think this summer, Tuchel's been a mix of, frustrated one minute, very happy in the next when they start getting good signings through the door. Then he's a bit confused about what's happening and why he's being asked for what players would suit this team. And he'll recommend Kimpembe, for example, when he knows he's not available. And then they go and try and sign him. And he's like, no, I didn't say go and sign him. You asked me who would be good in that position. I think we have to understand, like, Todd Boehly is very, very new to football. Like, he's been a businessman in sport, but it's been very different to this. And, I hear a lot of what goes on behind the scenes, and he seems and sounds to be a really lovely guy and one who's genuinely doing everything he can for Chelsea right now. Look, he's throwing £60 million there at Anthony Gordon. Like, you can't say the bloke's not trying to give this team what they want. But, there's it's all various aspects of the football culture he's trying to, I know that he's never really sure like what he should wear to meet certain people. Like, he's an American, he's from the American environment. Like, I don't think a lot of the times he might dress the way that other people in these meetings might typically dress. I know that at one point he turned up at the wrong address to meet a high profile person. I know that there have been moments when that wasn't his fault, by the way. I will back him up on that. I heard a story about it, and he did turn up at the wrong address. It wasn't his fault, but
the PA's got to go. The PA's got to go.
Yeah, but he did knock on the wrong door. But he's also been unsure of how to react when he's been in a meeting about one thing, and suddenly a player is proposed to him as a potential sign-in, whether that's a club or a specific agent. It's happened on various occasions this summer. He's out of his depth on the football front, and he knows that. So he usually does take a football head from Chelsea with him. And these people are just thrown into the firing line, basically. When these football questions come that he's actually not sure about at all, it'll just be like, ask him. And then this person on the spur of the moment has to decide like whether they might be interested in this person or that person. We've seen so many links to Chelsea this summer, and this is part of the reason that so many of them have had some substance, and it's taken a lot of working out as to what's legit and what's not, whether that's Ronaldo, Maguire, Kimpembe, Frenkie de Jong. There have been a lot of high-profile links, and a lot of them have had truth to them. I think what it probably leads us on well to Rafael Leao and the way that this transfer's come into the landscape and being talked about quite heavily, actually, in the last 24 hours. And Rafael Leao is somebody that Chelsea definitely have an eye on. But this all began when AC Milan began talking to Chelsea about signing Hakim Ziyech. Now, Chelsea used those talks as a platform to make their own inquiry, to ask about Leao's release clause, to find out his actual situation in terms of his contract, like what's his wage situation, what's his character like right now, like is he definitely staying at the club? And Chelsea came away from that meeting specifically knowing exactly what they would have to do if they were to sign Rafael Leao. Now, at the time, obviously, it's extremely high. He's got a massive release clause there. And it didn't help that at that moment, Milan actually decided not to go ahead with their pursuit of Hakim Ziyech. So those specific conversations kind of came to an end because Milan basically have a player called Junior Messias that they're looking at as the wide forward that they're going to go ahead with. They seem pretty set on that at the moment. But Leao is brilliant, and Chelsea know that. 150 million euros isn't going to happen. But it was a conversation that came out of other conversations and led them down a path whereby, well, look, he's pretty much the superstar at AC Milan. He's the breakthrough star of last season. He's going to be brilliant. But do we just put it on ice for a bit? Because that's a bit much money. We know he's trying to get a new contract. We know that his agent wants the release clause removed, and we might get him for cheaper in the next window. So that's something else to consider. But there's obviously been a lot of noise around Leao, and there is truth to it, but it's also like, well, I'm not sure it's quite as far advanced as some might have reported it.
Yeah, the Leao story, along with Nkunku as well, and we've seen a comment here from one of our members says Bowley has already held meetings regarding Nkunku. I feel like Nkunku and Leao could be next year's signings. Does that make sense? Almost, I know you've spoke about this before, and we had Ben Jacobs that has said this to the viewers, that sometimes you work on deals a little bit in advance. They're not all possible. Now, I got that feeling with Arsenal this summer when there was links to, I want to say Tonali. I felt like, I don't think that's going to be a this summer deal. I felt like it was someone in Italy reporting on preliminary talks about something for the future. But like, I get that like the Leaos and the Nkunkus are far more exciting. They're more fashionable names than what Chelsea are linked with. But Chelsea weren't going to sign no club signs all their signings in one summer. They lose out to other clubs or deals don't come to fruition. So I think there's a little bit of patience needed. And as Adrian says here, I'm hoping Paul Mitchell or Michael Edwards come to Chelsea ASAP. Need a director of football badly because they keep neglecting the midfield for years, and a DM since Matic. And a few people have asked that question, like including the super chat. Are Chelsea linked to any good quality midfielders to come in and improve them? Other than we know De Jong is someone they're looking at, but outside of De Jong, are they likely to improve that area at all, Dean?
It's difficult because, Declan Rice, we all know that they like, and they made inquiries early on in the window. They didn't lead anywhere, and it's kind of on the back burner because they felt it was just one they weren't going to make a breakthrough on. They didn't want to waste time on it because there were so many other areas of the team that needed strengthening. But there's no doubt that Chelsea are short in that area of the pitch right now. I think Conor Gallagher might still leave Chelsea in this window. If they do manage to get another head in there, I mean, Conor Gallagher himself, I think, always had concern over exactly where he would be employed in this team, and also whether he would actually get a legitimate chance of making his case at Chelsea, or whether they would end up thinking, okay, we can't risk our third place in the Premier League, we can't risk our Champions League status, let's sign someone that can come in and do a job. And they still might do that if the right opportunity arises. We've seen how talks come out of other talks, like we've talked about firstly with Leao, but obviously Barcelona is a case where they keep being linked with Barcelona players, and it's on the back of talks with whether it's Azpilicueta or Alonso, or it came on the back of them not getting Rafinha, whatever it might have been. But Aubameyang suddenly is on the table, and you're like, okay, well, if that can happen, then you could also end up in a conversation for a central midfielder. And Aubameyang is probably a similar case to what you were just explaining there in terms of somebody like Leao coming in next summer rather than this year. I mean, Chelsea need a short-term fix for goals. They don't have goals in this team. Like Kai Havertz at the moment is a shadow of himself from the stages of last season. It's probably not totally unexpected because Kai Havertz is not a number 9. He's not a renowned goal scorer at this point of his career. I think he's a brilliant player, and I think he's going to have a great career. But right now, him and Raheem Sterling and Mason Mount, they're just not there. They're not at the level they need to be. And they also don't have that competition for their place that's going to perhaps spur them on. And I think that's what Chelsea are looking at right now is, well, who could get that out of them? And obviously, when Ronaldo's pitched to them, for a moment, they consider it because they're like, well, he scores goals. And Jamie Vardy, he scores goals. Whoever it is that's pitched to them and that scored goals in the Premier League, they kind of have to consider it. And now Aubameyang, well, it's going to be more expensive than they would have imagined initially, but he's also about half the price of Anthony Gordon at this rate. So signing Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for 30 million euros suddenly looks like a bargain, because even if you were looking initially at like 15 million plus Alonso, at this point, and you're looking at your performances, Aubameyang would be a massive get. A couple of sources that I've got at Chelsea have been quite skeptical about the Aubameyang thing actually happening. They thought that if there was ever a deal that was going to collapse, that it would probably be this one. But actually, conversations keep remaining positive. And I guess the dilemma that Barcelona have got and that Aubameyang's got is that Barca need De Jong or Aubameyang or both off the wage structure, preferably only one, because Xavi doesn't want to lose both of them. But at the moment, as it stands, De Jong looks like he's staying, and that would make an Aubameyang exit more likely. So let's wait and see. But yeah, I think it's that Aubameyang as a short-term option for goals that is leading Chelsea. There aren't the concerns about his off-field stuff or his character upsetting this team. I think that was a very specific situation to Arsenal. It was a bit rocked with what his situation. Arsenal at the time were not the Arsenal and the club that we're seeing now. It was more the club that we're seeing, obviously, from the Amazon Prime documentary. And the club's come a long way in the last year. It's easy to forget these things. But when Aubameyang was there and he was, I guess misbehaving a little bit in terms of the rules that were being set by Arteta, it wasn't great. But Chelsea have changed their ethos, I guess, towards signing players like Aubameyang. They are willing to hand contracts to older, more experienced players in times of need. And I think that the Aubameyang is becoming more and more interesting by the day.
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea's situation is so interesting. And I get what Adrian's saying here about having someone better to come in and run it. And that's where I say Chelsea fans, I feel like some of them are turning on Tuchel. Patience. Because I know Tuchel was there prior to this season, but it's new ownership. It's new people running the club. Yes. Should they have kept some more of the senior people in charge? I think you judge that in 2 or 3 years' time. I think as football fans, sometimes the desire for instant gratification over clouds our judgment in the sense of I want it now. Let's see where you are in a year's time. You might have Paul Mitchell. You might be making better decisions. You could be the team, with Pep leaving in a year or two, and maybe Liverpool's reigns over as being one of the top two. Maybe you guys come to fruition, and it's your 4 or 5 year period, and you look back at all these decisions now, and they were the building blocks to get into that point. Like sometimes I think you've just got to let things, as much as you can complain, that isn't good enough. I don't like that deal. I wasn't happy with today's performance. Like football fans, I'm looking forward to a world where we get back to that without the end result being change it all, burn it all down. Sometimes I think you need a little bit more faith in what's kind of going on. Artem here says, when I saw Gibbs White price, I knew Gordon's price was going to go up. I like the players, but personally, I think that 60 million could be used elsewhere, like in midfield. Sorry,
that's a fair point. That's a very fair point.
There's a comment here that says from a member that says oh, sorry, I already put that one up there. Todd says Ziyech out in relation to that going on. Fofana, I want to speak for Fofana. Before that, I've seen a lot of reports today. You mentioned Zaha and Arsenal. I'm also seeing Zaha connected to Chelsea. Is there anything in that at all?
There is something in it. Zaha is somebody that Chelsea have had an eye on for a while, and again, it's at this stage. I'd say Aubameyang is obviously the one that they are pursuing on that front. If Aubameyang was to fall through, I could definitely see Zaha being the guy that they push for. There's been preliminary talks and soundings out on this front, but it hasn't led to anything. So Zaha definitely keen to try himself one last time at an elite club, if you like. Like he's tried it once before, kind of unsuccessfully. But his output at Palace has been pretty good over the course of his time there in terms of goals and assists and the levels that he's been playing at and the type of teams he's had around him. This one he's currently playing in, he's probably actually love him because they've just got more creativity about him. He's got a bit more license to thrill, and that's what suits him. He's playing brilliantly. But Chelsea do have an eye on Wilfried Zaha, and he's not the top option, so he'll be a fallback option if things aren't going their way.
Yeah. Zaha, everyone knows when it comes to me, Zaha is one of those people where he's in rich frame of form right now. I just don't know how good he is. However, for Chelsea, again, will he score more and create more than Werner and Ziyech and these guys? Yes. It's looked at in that way. Absolutely is. Viewers, any questions that you've got regarding any of these deals, feel free to put them forward to us. Feel free to do that and come on and have your say on the football terrace right now. We want to hear from you. I want to get your views and your opinions. I did want to ask a bit about Liverpool because Liverpool fans are starting to get to a point where they are angry, where they are frustrated, where they are, again, I'm not saying they are a lot of FSG out tweets, a lot of people moaning about their squad. Is there any noise? And I know it's very hard to pick up on Liverpool, but is there any noise of new players coming in? Because they look fragile, slow, and that squad with it's not even that it's thin. Is that the players that are now out injured are nearly always out injured, one of them at least. Anything going to happen at Liverpool?
Look, they need a new midfielder. They need one. They've got a lot of injuries at the moment, and particularly in that area of the field. Keita, Curtis Jones, Thiago, Oxlade-Chamberlain. He'd be one of the ones that you say is always injured, and that's fair enough. But ultimately, Liverpool are considering, if the right option came along, signing a midfielder. But it would be short term because they're happy with their squad overall, and they were happy at the start of the season with what they had available to them, and they could not have seen this moment coming. Now, look, they've still got depth there. Like, they're bringing Fabinho off the bench. Like, it's a pretty ridiculous situation to be in. Harvey Elliott is getting probably way more game time than most people were expecting at this point. And I think that this isn't a new topic, is it? Let's be honest. Even at the start of the summer, you're looking at it and you're like, well, Liverpool aren't planning to make any transfers. If they were, there's two spots. They need a midfielder and they need someone to replace Sadio Mane because they haven't done it. And as you look at it right now, we're 3 games into the season, and Sadio Mane is a massive miss, something I don't think is talked about enough. Like last night, if Sadio Mane was playing, I think Liverpool probably still would have found a way to win that game. I also think that midfield area, despite the depth, they're starting James Milner, and I'm not knocking James Milner. Like, it's unbelievable what he's achieving in his career and to still be in that starting lineup. But it's kind of ridiculous that they're having to even play James Milner and Harvey Elliott and then decide who, is it Jordan Henderson? Who else can fit in there? So it's a strange one. But obviously, like, the players that Liverpool would look to sign in that position aren't available at the moment, and they're not just going to sign someone for the sake of it. Thiago was kind of a one-off when he came in because Klopp identified him at the time. He didn't think they really needed him, but he was like, we can get this player. They got him through the door. But Jude Bellingham would be the one that Liverpool would really want in this area of the field. Like, there's no doubt that they are waiting for Jude Bellingham's situation to open up, and that is not happening at the moment. And because of that, Jurgen Klopp's going to be patient, I think, and just wait for that to happen, unless he's presented with something that's just too good to turn down in these last few days of the window. There's no hiding from it. Like, Liverpool are in a bad place at the moment. They don't seem themselves. This is not the Liverpool of old. And yes, there's no doubt that it's because of injuries. It's because they've lost Mane. But there's also something else missing at the moment, and it's a bit of belief, I think.
Yeah, it's very intriguing indeed because of I look at one player in this team. I look at Virgil van Dijk, and he just looks knackered. That would be that's my professional assessment. As an ex-athlete myself, he looks this expression doesn't get used by the modern day generation, but he looks shagged out. Right? He looks absolutely exhausted. And it's interesting watching him play that it's like he's not stepping out. He's obviously still fast and strong and powerful, has great positioning. He's still probably the best centre back in the world. But if other defenders felt if certain other defenders in the Prem, I'm not going to name them, didn't close down Zaha, if they stood on the spot with their hands behind their back and didn't make they would be getting memed and laughed at. And he hasn't looked right now. The back end of last season, same thing. You think about the goal against that stands out where Lissandro plays for Inter. No, it might be not
Lautaro Martinez.
Lautaro Martinez, not Lissandro. Lautaro Martinez. The kind of backing off instead of pushing in. I just wonder whether Jurgen Klopp's style, the intensity of training, play, the 100 miles an hour they have to run every single game because of how good City are. I wonder whether for some of the older players now, it hasn't just taken its toll a little bit in terms of they're just feeling a little bit tired. The squad is thin. Yes, he rotates and everything else, but certain players, Trent barely gets a rest. Van Dijk, when he isn't injured, barely gets a rest. There's certain individuals that just look like they've just maybe done a little bit too much. But he might come back into form in a few weeks' time, and all this conversation is irrelevant. But it's kind of weird the way they've started the season. And look, Trent, he's been exposed for what he is. He's a world-class crosser of the ball. He's a world-class passer of the ball. But as an out-and-out defender, he's not very good. Like they say, I hear Liverpool fans say best right back in the history of the Premier League, and they base it purely on his crossing ability. And it's like, well, I'm sorry to disrespect you, but Gary Neville was twice the defender he was. Zabaleta twice the defender he is, and that's just to name a few. Like Kyle Walker, as an overall, like in terms of his ability to go forward and defend, Kyle Walker better than him. In fact, I think when you look at the ability to attack and defend, Kieran Trippier is on that same level. Now, as a crosser of the ball, I would say only David Beckham and KDB have been better than him in the Premier League. I'd easily put him in the top 2, top 3, top 4 crossers of the ball. He's an excellent passer, but I just think defensively, I mean, he's come to that point in his career where I kind of feel like maybe now is the time to start developing him into a different position, because so you can take him away from those defensive actions, because the amount of times it's that right-hand side of the amount of times that right-hand side is exploited, and he's so like simple 1-2s catch him out. It's like basic stuff all the time. And again, it would worry me as a Liverpool fan. And I think the day Jurgen Klopp goes, if he's still there, and if the system isn't as good, if the new manager isn't as good, this guy could be looked at as horrendous in that way. And some of the defensive mistakes he makes, I'm not even like saying it because he's a Liverpool player. I think he's so good going forward. But defensively, he's an absolute liability. And a few of these things are all going wrong for Liverpool at the same time. Maybe when centre-backs are playing well, it covers that mistake. When your midfield is at its best and there's no injuries, they can cover the holes and mistakes that he's making. You scratch the surface of Liverpool and there's big problems. And they were my pick to win the league. I thought they were going to win the league this year. I thought they were going to come back after last year and be even better. And as it looks right now, I'm so wrong on that. It's unbelievable. They honestly, they look awful. They look absolutely awful. And that's not taking nothing away from your team. Fulham, you should have beaten them. Palace should have beaten them. And Man United did beat them. Like all three teams have done them. And, that's three teams that are predicted to be in the bottom half of the table beating them so far. So.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. Look, we'll only see a true reflection once they have all their players available. I mean, Klopp said himself, like, we've got 14, 15 players available, senior players week to week, and he's used to having a much bigger base of players to choose from, and he's used certainly to turning to his bench and having better options. Not having Jota at the moment is a big one, because he's a game changer normally when he comes on, if not even starting. So he hasn't even got things like that to fall back on at the moment. And you can see, United obviously targeted Trent once his confidence dipped in that game. Elanga was tearing him up at one point. There was obviously the goal from Sancho, and Milner's on the floor, and then he gets up and he's shouting at Van Dijk, who's been defending with his hands behind his back and just standing there, and Alisson's on the floor. And it did look like, I think Jamie Carragher said it, they looked like a team of old men. And they did a little bit. They did. But I don't think that this will be the Liverpool we see all season. It might be that this is their blip and that they come back from it and they go on an unbelievable run at some point. So we can't write this team off based on 3 games, because we've seen too much of this squad and the character of these players over the last 3 or 4 years to do that. But there's some deep analysis going on right now, I'm sure, for Jurgen Klopp and his backroom team. And as part of that, I think that if the right opportunity was to come to them, then they would make one more transfer.
Yeah. Look, I think Liverpool will improve. There's no doubt about it. It's just, again, when I'm judging Liverpool, I'm judging them in the sphere of they're already 6 points behind. Is it 6
They've
points?
got 2 points, haven't they? They've got 2 points. So
I'm just
they're well off the pace.
Yeah, so they're 5 points behind City already. And they're 7 points behind Arsenal. I know that it's early in the season. We've got loads of time to bring it back. And City could go on a bad run. But if you said to Liverpool fans at the start of the season, if we give City a 5-point advantage, are you confident you'd win the league? I reckon Liverpool supporters would say to you, 95% got no chance of winning the league if City started with a 5-point head start. They've essentially got a 5-point head start 3 games into the season. Like, it makes it, with how good City are and how consistent they are. They've got Bournemouth on Saturday, Liverpool. I cannot imagine a world where they don't beat them. If they drop points to Bournemouth and City win, and suddenly that 5 points jumps to 8, their season's over in the sense of how good Liverpool are. If you're not winning the Premier League, it's a disappointing season. If you're out the title race in the opening couple of months, it's your season's done. Like, that's the level you're at now. You're not where Arsenal are. You're not where Tottenham are. You're not where Man United are. Where fighting out for top 4 is where you expect to be. This is the team that has been touted as one of the greatest 2 teams in Premier League history. Like, it needs the criticism that goes with it. I mean, I don't personally think they are. I don't even put them in the top 5. They haven't gone back to back, but people say they're that good. So if you're that good, the criticism after failing to win your opening 3 games has to be bigger than Man United losing their opening 2, who are shit.
Yeah. I mean, there is that argument for sure. Look, at the weekend, it's a really interesting fixture list, because Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City, and Arsenal are all at home, and all have teams that you would expect them to be. Arsenal home to Fulham, Man City home to Crystal Palace, Liverpool home to Bournemouth, and Chelsea home to Leicester. Now, you look at that and imagine that all 4 of those teams would win those games, but they won't. That won't happen. Like, all 4 of those teams will not win those games. And Liverpool, if they're the ones that would be the biggest mess if they didn't win that game. Like, Bournemouth at home, you have to be taking 3 points from that game. Like, after seeing what Arsenal just done to them last week too, you have to carry that on. Look, it could be the perfect fixture for them. Maybe it's the game where they score 3 or 4, you know, some unity is back in the side, and they've got a bit of confidence, and they get their swagger back a little bit, and then they can start to go on from there. And then, you know, the next week they're ready to go again, and I think they face Newcastle the week after, and that's a big fixture. Like a match against Newcastle at this stage of the season, if they were to lose or not beat Bournemouth, and then you go into a match against Newcastle, suddenly you're thinking this could actually go 5 games without Liverpool picking up a first win in the season. So, yeah, it's a must-win game against Bournemouth. There's no doubt about that, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's one of those things for me where these are those weekends where there's always a coupon buster. There's always one that will go wrong.
Yep.
And in the last 5-6 years of the Prem, that always happens. That United again. And listen, I'm a United fan. We've got Southampton, and it's a weird game because they started the season poorly. But it's one of those games where if we play awfully and get beating Liverpool means nothing. However,
Yeah.
we
I
play
feel like it's always a draw anyway. And every time you play Southampton, I swear it's a draw.
away in the last few years.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And ironically, we played them. It's very close to my daughter's 4th birthday. On her 1st birthday was when we played them. Dan James scored first. They equalized, almost mirrors the time. And again, go and beat them. And again, that's great news for us, but it puts pressure on all our rivals, because then it's a case of we've all got gimmies. And these are the gimmies where if you want to make top 4 this year, if you want to win the league this year, you can't be dropping points. No disrespect to Fulham or Bournemouth or any team like that. You can't be dropping points to them, because there are going to be 2 or 3 teams that just excel in that way. And Spurs and Arsenal have started the season, and they look like they're going to do that. They don't look this year like they're going to be dropping very many points against those sides. So, yeah, it's one of them ones for me, mate. But there we go.
100%.
City drops 14 to 20 points per season. Liverpool 7 now. Yeah, exactly. And look, Liverpool will drop again. We could all be wrong, and Liverpool drop only 2 more points for the rest of the season. That could happen, right? But it
doesn't feel like it at the moment. Yeah.
No. Dean Dest was a backup to, I can't pronounce that name.
Mazraoui at Ajax. He was, yeah, but I think he ended up taking his place, didn't he? If I'm not wrong. It was Mazraoui and Dest were, the 2 right backs at Ajax. I think when Ten Hag was there, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. But viewers, before you leave, do me a big favor and smash that like and that share button. Make sure you subscribe into the Terrace. 6 p.m. I'm back live for Straight Facts with Lee Gunner. And an interesting story tonight. I don't want to break it, but someone that appears regularly on Lee Gunner's channel for his footballing opinions was savagely attacked, wife beaten up, and him reportedly attacked with a blade last night over footballing opinions. And we're tackling that on the Football Terrace later. So make sure you're tuning in at 6 p.m. to hear what's happened in that situation. But yeah, there's a lot of nasty people out there in this world, especially in this football space, it seems. So we're back then. Dino, absolute pleasure, my friend. Really do appreciate it.
Cheers,
and we'll speak again soon. Viewers, take care. Goodbye. God bless.